Item 4 on your agenda, this is where I get to pass back to Ken. As the outgoing chair of trustees, I'd like to ask him to give the strategic overview. Thank you.
Thanks, Gail, and thank you for your kind comments. I'm glad the discussion previously didn't put you off standing for chair of CBA. So, yeah, just as folk thought they got rid of me, here I am again. As it seemed unreasonable to expect the new chair to do a strategic overview for a year that they hadn't been in office. So, as in more recent years, there's a lot of information about the last year's work of the CBA in the more detailed trustees report section of the financial statement, a copy of which you will have received in the papers for this AGM. And you'll be hearing more from our executive director in his report in due course. This is necessarily, therefore, as ever, a more selective overview. I hope that you will also indulge me a little in this, my final report as Chair of Trustees, insofar as I would like to examine the trends, the common issues that have been the subject of my previous commentaries. These can be brigaded broadly under the headings of politics, impacts on our heritage and archaeology, and impacts on the CBA. And inevitably, there are some issues that encompass some or all of those areas. Political impacts range widely, from the impacts of Brexit on the initial availability of archaeologists from beyond our shores to fill the vacancies across the industry, but particularly in the essential areas of fieldwork ahead of development, to the recently announced steep cuts in heritage funding by the Welsh Government and the ongoing tinkering with the development management or planning process in England, with the threat of more to come. I've previously instanced the now completed work on the A14 around Cambridge, where some 250 archaeologists were working with, in one location, 75% originating from outside the UK, from some 30 different countries. The CBA's engagement with the problem of staff shortages, with others, resulted in the profession being added to the shortage occupation list and the subject being added to the STEM subjects that receive additional funding support from government. It's unclear how the recently proposed raising of the salary threshold will impact on the need that still remains for us to import professional archaeologists to enable us to record our heritage ahead of its destruction through development. At the same time, our relative lack of homegrown talent has been exacerbated by the decision to remove the Archaeology A-level from the syllabus and by the recent spate of closures of departments of archaeology across England. In spite of a concerted campaign, the University of Sheffield's Department of Archaeology is about to close. While a good many contracting archaeological units now make in-house training provision, the raw material, as it were, the recent graduates, is still needed. Without a knowledge of the prehistoric or historic contextual landscape within which development-led work is being done, it's an even steeper learning curve that candidates need to scale. The planning process is probably the principal tool that enables the management of change in the historic environment. And that's a fancy way of saying that it enables a few heritage assets to be protected from development, while, in the main, ensuring that recording of one form or another is undertaken ahead of development, where the heritage resource will be destroyed. The process was formalised with the production initially of Planning Policy Guidance 16, Archaeology and Planning, or PPG 16 as it was known, in November 1990, and has become formally established in the planning process. Indeed, most recently and most welcome was the inclusion of sections in the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act of 2023 that make the provision of a historic environment record, as sites and monuments records are now known, a statutory requirement for local authorities. While funding is being made available for this process, unfortunately, it's not been ring-fenced for the HERs, which underpin the archaeological input to the planning process. This will doubtless lead to issues a little way down the line. The inclusion of archaeology in the development management process has been seen by some developers as an opportunity to demonstrate their contribution to the heritage, past and present, of particular communities, while others see it still as another impediment to their ability to pursue development. Powerful lobbies seem to have convinced the governments that the solution to the housing crisis is to sweep away so-called red tape in the face of government's own research that identified a pipeline of existing permissions for 1 million dwellings, with their release being managed in order not to impact on the sale price of newly built houses. where the skilled workforce needed to build such houses is actually available. It's not just archaeology that is suffering a skills shortage. While the present government has backed away from the far-reaching changes to the planning process that were being suggested a little while ago, tinkering still occurs. The latest being the proposals, the extension of permitted development rights, to allow the conversion of farm buildings to dwellings wherever they might occur. This time around, the proposals don't exclude national parks, where such an initiative would have hugely damaging impacts on these nationally designated landscapes. And by way of declaration, I am chair of the Peak District National Park Authority, but I would still be critical of this proposal even if I wasn't. What I find even more depressing is that the Labour Party appears to have bought into this idea that the way to meet the housing crisis is to do away with more of the current planning regulation. If it does form the next government, then I foresee another round of explanation and lobbying by the heritage sector to seek to persuade government that the most positive and appropriate way forward is to manage change, and that means regulation, in order to both meet the challenge of more and better housing while retaining the character of localities in terms of form, massing, and materials, for example, without destroying the character of particular areas, so that the Cotswolds remain the Cotswolds, the Yorkshire Dales remain the Yorkshire Dales, and so on. While wildlife and the natural environment generally receive greater public support and far greater financial investment than the historic environment, I console myself by reminding as many people as often as possible that habitats only exist because of past and present human activity, that natural phenomena are really cultural phenomena, reflecting as they do the human response to the natural landscape. At the same time, governments have recognised that they have a responsibility towards archaeology and the historic environment, and this is reflected in the funding that goes, for example, to national heritage organisations such as Historic England, Historic Environment Scotland, and CADU. While Historic England's budget currently remains stable, and Scotland has recently proposed increases to the budgets for arts and culture, Wales has taken a retrograde step. Budget cuts across Welsh departments generally average around 5%, but the National Library, National Museum and Arts Council Wales have received cuts of 10%. Even worse, CADU and the Welsh Royal Commission have been cut by 22%, which is suggested as being a real term cut of 27%. It's difficult to see how either organisation can continue to fulfil its responsibilities in the face of cuts of that magnitude. While recognising that in the current economic environment, cuts are probably inevitable, impacts of this magnitude, which inevitably impact on the capacity to enable communities to recognise and celebrate their heritage, a heritage that has always appeared to receive passionate support from Wales and the Welsh, do seem counterproductive. CBA, while acknowledging that it has been the recipient of financial support from Wales in the past, has made representation, not least because without that support, the continuation of young archaeologist clubs in Wales is jeopardised, as are other initiatives, such as delivering the Festival of Archaeology in Wales. Obviously, issues such as Welsh Government funding, along with many other decisions made elsewhere, impact on the CBA and its ability to deliver for communities of place and interest across the UK and beyond. Equally obviously, we are not alone in suffering or benefiting from such decisions. I'd like, though, to conclude more positively, noting that 2024 marks the 80th anniversary of the CBA. Brought into existence in 1944 in order to input to post-war reconstruction and to ensure that the historic environment was taken into account, the fortunes of the CBA have waxed and waned over the decades. As approaches to archaeology and heritage and to community engagement and the tools available to achieve these ends have changed, then the CBA has had to change. Sometimes it might be suggested that the CBA has lagged behind. On other occasions, it has proved to be fleet of foot, sometimes influencing change, sometimes being influenced by it. During my time as chair, CBA has been in a period of change. Initiatives begun by Mike Hayworth have been taken forward by our current executive director, Neil Redfern, who you will be hearing from shortly. Neil has refined them, reshaped them, and introduced new initiatives, that have breathed fresh life into the organisation. It's already significantly different to what it was when I became chair of trustees in 2017. We have a sounder financial base. It may still need work, but it is much improved. We have a sound policy base supported by appropriate policy documents. Our website is improved and improving. Our new CRM enables improved management of and for our members and our customers generally. Our new editor has brought positive change to our already very good British Archaeology magazine. Our trustees are being appointed in recognition of the skills need of the CBA and the skills and experience they can bring to bear. And we are beginning to reflect the makeup of the UK's communities, especially through our young archaeologist clubs, and are becoming a better and more inclusive organisation as a result. Without wishing to give away what the future might hold, not least because that's the territory of Neil and our new chair of trustees, significant further progress will occur if our National Lottery Heritage Fund bid is successful. A decision should be available by the end of February, and about which I believe Neil will say more. Even if it is unsuccessful, there will be change to improve the impacts of the CBA, to engage with more people from a wider range of communities with greater and farther-reaching results and benefits. But enough from me. I'd like to finish by thanking my fellow trustees for their support and wise counsel over the years, both those who are continuing as well as those who are leaving now and who left in previous years, and welcome our new trustees. I would like also to thank the staff of the CBA for making my role the relative pleasure that it has been. I recognise that, as with so many charities, staff work for the CBA because of their conviction that it's the right thing to do, and as a result often go that extra mile. In such a smaller organisation, overwork as a result of enthusiasm for the cause has to be guarded against, if only for the benefit of the employee. And naming names is invidious, but I'd like to thank Neil for the work he has done to date, for the working relationship that he and I have had, and wish him well in his future management of the CBA, and with Gail and Peter as the new chair and vice chair, to whom I wish every success as well. And lastly, I would, of course, once again like to thank you, our members and supporters, for your continuing engagement with the CBA. Without you and your support in its many and varied ways, we cannot succeed. I hope you continue to support this charity into the future and thoroughly enjoy the opportunities that engagement with the CBA brings. Thank you.